My name is Erica, and I never thought I'd be caught up in a family drama that would change my life forever. At 29, I was living a pretty ordinary life in the city. For the past 5 years, I'd been working as a secretary at Global Tech, a big corporation downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills for my small rented apartment. Weekends were my escape. I'd throw myself into dance classes, losing myself in the rhythm and forgetting about the pile of paperwork waiting for me on Monday. It wasn't much, but it was my life, and I was content. Family, though? That was complicated. I had a younger sister, Emily, who'd always been the golden child. From the day she was born, our mother doted on her like she was made of spun sugar. Dad, well, he just fell in line with whatever Mom wanted. It was always Emily this and Emily that. I tried not to be bitter, but it was hard not to feel like a shadow in my own family. As years went by, the distance between us grew. Phone calls became less frequent, visits even more so. I'd see pictures on social media of family gatherings I wasn't invited to, Emily always front and center, beaming with our parents. It stung, but I told myself I was better off focusing on my own life. That's why I nearly dropped my phone when Mom's number flashed on my screen one Tuesday evening. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for whatever drama might be on the other end. "Erica, it's your mother," her voice crackled through the speaker. "Hi, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Is everything okay?" "Your father wants to see you," she said, cutting straight to the chase. "Can you come to the house this weekend?" "Saturday at 2 p.m. Don't be late." And with that, she hung up. I stared at my phone, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. What could be so important that Dad wanted to see me after all this time? Part of me wanted to ignore the invitation, to protect myself from inevitable disappointment. But curiosity won out. I'd go, if only to find out what was going on. As I stood outside my parents' expensive home that Saturday, I took a deep breath. The house looked the same as always, a monument to my parents' success and a reminder of the life I'd never quite fit into. I rang the doorbell, half expecting no one to answer, half hoping no one would. The door swung open, and there stood my mother, her face a mask of polite indifference. "You're here," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Everyone's in the living room." Seated in the plush living room were my father, looking pale and drawn, my sister Emily, and her husband, James. The atmosphere was tense, thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. I perched on the edge of an armchair, feeling like an outsider in my own family home. Up close, I could see how ill Dad looked. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes seemed sunken. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this wasn't just a casual family gathering. "I've got something to tell you all," Dad continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. I'm terminally ill. The doctors say I don't have much time left." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gasped, tears springing to my eyes. Despite our strained relationship, I loved my father. The thought of losing him was unbearable. "Daddy," I choked out, reaching for his hand. He squeezed mine weakly, a sad smile on his face. Emily let out a dramatic sob, burying her face in her husband's shoulder. Mom sat stone-faced, her lips pressed into a thin line. I wondered how long they'd known, how long they'd kept this from me. "There's more," Dad said, his voice growing stronger. "I've made some decisions about my will." The room fell silent. Even Emily's sobs quieted as everyone leaned in, listening intently. "Mary," Dad said, looking at Mom, "you'll get the apartment in the city." Mom nodded curtly, as if this was expected. "Emily, the house will be yours." My sister's eyes lit up, a smile breaking through her tears. Then Dad turned to me, and I saw a determination in his eyes I'd never seen before. "Erica, I've decided to leave you my savings. All of it. $800,000. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. $800,000? It was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But more than that, it felt like acknowledgement, a way of making up for years of being overlooked. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, all hell broke loose. Emily jumped to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "Dad, that's not fair. Eric is barely even part of this family anymore." "She doesn't deserve it," Mom hissed, glaring at me as if I'd somehow orchestrated this. "John, you need to exclude her from the will. Now." I sat there, stunned, as my mother and sister railed against me. And then Dad slammed his fist on the coffee table, the sound echoing through the room. "Enough," he roared, his face flushed with anger. "This is my decision, and I won't change it." Turning to Mom, his eyes blazing, he continued, "I've been under your influence for far too long, Mary. I've neglected Erica because of you, and it ends now." The room fell silent once more. I stared at my father, seeing him in a new light. For the first time in my life, he was standing up for me. Dad turned to me then, his anger melting into sorrow. "Erica, can you ever forgive me? I've been a terrible father to you." Tears streaming down my face, I moved to him, wrapping my arms around his frail frame. "I forgive you, Dad," I whispered. "I love you." We held each other for a long moment, years of hurt and misunderstanding flowing away. When we finally separated, Dad looked exhausted. "I need to rest now," he said, slowly getting to his feet. "Erica, thank you for coming." As Dad left the room, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Mom stepped forward, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Listen here, Erica. You need to do the right thing and give up your share of the inheritance." "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I won't give it up. Dad wants me to have it, and I'm respecting his wishes." Emily's face contorted with rage. She stepped closer, her finger jabbing at my chest. "You'll regret this, Erica. Mark my words." Over the next 2 weeks, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Mom and Emily. Each one demanded I give up the inheritance, their tone growing increasingly hostile and threatening. I ignored them all, focusing on work and my dance classes, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, I got the call I'd been dreading. Dad had passed away in his sleep. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and somber faces. Mom and Emily put on a show of grief, wailing dramatically and clutching each other. I noticed Emily wearing an obscenely expensive necklace and bracelet set, the diamonds catching the light as she dabbed at her dry eyes. After the service, we gathered at the house. I watched in disgust as Emily made a show of removing her jewelry, tucking it into her purse with exaggerated care. As the last of the guests trickled out, I gathered my things, eager to escape. That's when all hell broke loose. "My jewelry!" Emily shrieked, her hands flying to her face in mock horror. "It's gone. Someone's stolen it." Mom's eyes locked onto me, her gaze accusing. Well. Isn't it convenient that the only person who's been here all day is the one who stands to gain so much? I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized what was happening. They were setting me up. "You can't be serious," I sputtered. "I didn't take anything." Emily's husband stepped forward, his voice oozing false concern. "Then you won't mind showing us what's in your purse, right, Erica?" I clutched my bag tighter, my mind racing. I knew I was innocent, but something told me that wouldn't matter if I opened my purse. "No," I said firmly. "I don't have to prove anything to you." Emily's husband pulled out his phone. "Then you leave me no choice. I'm calling the police." As he dialed, I saw a triumphant smirk flash across Emily's face. In that moment, I realized just how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as 2 officers entered the house. Emily immediately launched into a tearful account of her stolen jewelry, painting herself as the grieving daughter, victimized on the day of her father's funeral. "Officers," Emily's husband said, his voice dripping with false concern, "we have reason to believe Erica may have taken the jewelry. She's refusing to show us the contents of her purse." The older of the 2 officers turned to me, his face impassive. "Ma'am, would you mind opening your purse for us?" I felt trapped, knowing that whatever happened next would not end well for me. With shaking hands, I opened my purse. The officer looked inside, and his expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," he said, reaching into my purse and pulling out Emily's necklace and bracelet. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "This isn't possible," I stammered. "I didn't take these. I'm being set up." But my protests fell on deaf ears. Mom and Emily launched into a tirade, calling me a thief, a liar, hurling insults that cut deeper than any knife. As the officers led me out, I caught a glimpse of Emily's smug smile, hidden behind her hand as she pretended to sob. At the police station, I sat in a stark interrogation room, still in my funeral clothes, trying to make sense of what had happened. Hours passed, and then the door opened. To my surprise, it was my mother who walked in, not a police officer. She dismissed the officer standing guard, insisting on speaking to me alone. As soon as the door closed behind her, Mom's demeanor changed entirely. Gone was the grieving widow, replaced by a cold, calculating woman I barely recognized. "Listen carefully, Erica," she hissed, leaning close. "You have one chance to fix this mess. Give up the inheritance. Sign it over to Emily, and all of this goes away. The charges, the scandal, everything." I stared at her, disbelief warring with a growing sense of betrayal. You set me up? Your own daughter?" Mom's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Oh, please. You stopped being part of this family long ago. Now, you have a choice. Give up the money, or we'll make sure you go to prison. Think about it, Erica. A thief who stole from her own sister at their father's funeral? Your reputation will be ruined. You'll lose everything." I felt sick to my stomach, the full weight of their betrayal crashing down on me. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I won't do it. I didn't steal anything, and I won't let you blackmail me." Mom's eyes flashed with anger. "You ungrateful little rat," she spat. "I hope you enjoy prison. Everyone will know what you did, stealing from your own family. You'll be nothing but a criminal, a disgrace." With that, she turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, stunned, tears streaming down my face as the reality of my situation sank in. I was released on bail later that night, stumbling out of the police station into the cool night air. My phone buzzed, a message from my boss at Global Tech. My stomach dropped as I read it. "Erica, I've heard some disturbing rumors. Until the situation is resolved, I think it's best you take some time off. Paid leave, of course. I believe in your innocence, but we need to protect the company's reputation. Take care." I leaned against the cold brick wall of the station, feeling my world crumbling around me. In the span of a day, I'd lost my father, been betrayed by my family, arrested, and now I was on the verge of losing my job. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. With trembling fingers, I searched online for private investigators in the area. One name stood out, Jack Reeves, a former police detective turned PI with a reputation for solving complex cases. I made the call, my voice steadier than I expected as I explained my situation. "Ms. Thompson," Jack said after I finished my story, "this is a delicate situation. Family conspiracies are never easy to prove. But if what you're saying is true, we'll find evidence. It won't be cheap, though." I thought of the inheritance I was fighting for. Money's not an issue. I need to clear my name and expose what they've done. The next 3 weeks were a blur of clandestine meetings with Jack, anxious waiting, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my dance classes on weekends, desperate for any distraction from the constant worry. My phone remained silent, no calls from work, no more threats from my family. The silence was almost worse than the conflict. Then, one rainy afternoon, my phone rang. It was Jack. "Erica," he said, his voice grave. "I've got news, but you're not going to like it." My heart sank. "What is it, Jack?" He sighed heavily. "I've been following your mother and sister, trying to catch them discussing the inheritance or the theft. But they're careful, too careful. They never talk about it in public, and I can't legally bug their homes. I felt the last glimmer of hope fading. So that's it? There's nothing we can do? Not exactly, Jack replied, a note of hesitation in his voice. I did find something, but it's not related to your case. It's about your sister. I sat up straighter. What about her? She's having an affair, Erica. I have photographic evidence of her entering a hotel with a young man, definitely not her husband. I also managed to record some of their conversations. It's not flattering to her husband, to say the least. For a moment, I sat in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. Jack, I said, my voice low and determined, I need you to send me everything you have on this. And I mean everything. As soon as I hung up, I sprang into action. I spent the next hour poring over the photos and recordings Jack sent, my mind racing with possibilities. Finally, I made a decision. I selected the most damning photo, my sister entering the hotel with her young lover, and sent it to her husband's phone with a simple message. Interested in knowing what happened next? Meet me at Cafe Luna tomorrow at 2 p.m. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my nerves on edge. At exactly 2 p.m., Emily's husband walked in, his face a mask of barely contained fury and curiosity. What's this about, Erica? He demanded as he sat down across from me. I took a deep breath. I think you know, James. But what you've seen is just the tip of the iceberg. Over the next hour, I laid out everything I had. The photos, the recordings of Emily laughing about James's age, mocking his performance in bed, discussing her plans to leave him once she got her hands on the full inheritance. James sat in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, he looked up at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and rage. What do you want? He asked, his voice hoarse. I leaned forward. I want justice, James. And I think you do too. Help me prove that they framed me, and we can both get what we deserve. A few days after my meeting with James, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from him, containing several audio files. My heart raced as I pressed play on the first one. Emily's voice filled the air. Can you believe how easy it was to plant that jewelry in Erica's purse? My mother's laughter followed. I know. The look on her face when the police found it was priceless. Well, she'll have no choice but to give it up now. I listened to file after file, each one filled with their callous plotting and cruel laughter. A mix of vindication and disgust washed over me. Finally, I had the proof I needed. The day of the will reading arrived quickly. I entered the notary's office, my stomach in knots, but my resolve firm. Mom and Emily were already there, shooting me smug looks. James sat quietly in the corner, giving me an almost imperceptible nod. The notary, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. Let's begin, he said, unfolding the document before him. He read through the will, detailing the distribution of assets, just as Dad had explained that day at the house. As he finished, I stood up. If I may, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, there's something I need to address before we conclude. Mom's eyes lit up, and she nodded approvingly. I'm glad you've finally come to your senses, Erica. I knew you'd make the right decision and give up the inheritance. Mom and Emily exchanged triumphant glances, their faces beaming with anticipation. But I was about to disappoint them. I'm afraid you've misunderstood, I said, pulling out my phone. I think you'll all want to hear this. I pressed play, and the room filled with their voices, gleefully discussing how they had framed me for theft. As the recording played, I watched the color drain from their faces. Emily let out a strangled gasp, while Mom sat rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. When it ended, chaos erupted. You lying scum! Emily screeched, lunging towards me. How dare you! Mom hissed, her composure cracking. You ungrateful, scheming. I recorded those conversations. James suddenly spoke up, his voice cutting through the commotion. The room descended into madness. Emily was screaming at James, Mom was hurling insults at me, and I stood there, watching it all unfold. Silence. The notary's voice boomed, startling us all into quiet. This is a legal proceeding, not a circus. Everyone will calm down this instant, or I'll have you all removed. As the notary's words echoed through the room, a heavy silence fell. It was broken by James, who stood up abruptly, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Since we're airing dirty laundry," he said, his voice trembling with anger, "I have something to add." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, slapping it down on the table in front of Emily. Emily's face drained of color as she stared at the image. It showed her entering a hotel with a man who was decidedly not her husband. "I know everything, Emily," James spat. "Your affair, your lies, all of it. I'm filing for divorce, and thanks to our prenup, you won't see a penny. You'll be paying me compensation for your infidelity." Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no words coming out. Mom looked between Emily and James, her expression a mix of shock and dawning horror as she realized their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. Suddenly, the door to the notary's office swung open. 2 police officers walked in, their faces stern. "Mary and Emily Thompson," one of them asked, though it was clear he already knew who they were. Mom and Emily looked up, tears streaking their faces. "You're under arrest for false accusations of theft and attempted blackmail," the officer continued. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the police read them their rights and handcuffed them, I watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This was justice, but it was also the final nail in the coffin of our family relationship. I walked out of the office behind the police, watching as they put Mom and Emily into separate patrol cars. As the sirens faded into the distance, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. Taking out my phone, I dialed a familiar number. "Erica," my boss's voice came through, sounding concerned. "Is everything all right?" "Better than all right," I replied, a smile in my voice. "I can explain everything now. The accusations against me were false, and I have proof." I gave him a brief rundown of what had happened. As I finished, I heard him let out a low whistle. "Erica, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that," he said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "But I'm glad the truth came out. Listen, your job is still here whenever you're ready to come back. In fact, I'd be delighted to see you at work as soon as you feel up to it." The weeks following the confrontation at the notary's office were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and life-changing decisions. As the truth came to light, the charges against me were quickly dropped. The relief I felt was indescribable, like a weight I'd been carrying for months suddenly lifted from my shoulders. But for Mom and Emily, the nightmare was just beginning. They faced charges of false accusation and attempted blackmail. The trial was swift and damning, with the recorded evidence leaving no room for doubt. In the end, they were found guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, looked down at them from her bench. In addition to the criminal penalties, this court orders Mary and Emily Thompson to pay substantial damages to Erica Thompson for emotional distress and damage to her reputation. The fine was staggering. Mom's face went pale as the amount was read out, while Emily burst into tears. In the days that followed, I watched from a distance as their lives unraveled. Mom, with no other choice, was forced to sell the apartment Dad had left her. It was a beautiful place in the heart of the city, but now it slipped from her grasp, the proceeds going straight to me as part of the damages. Emily's situation was even more dire. The house she'd been so smug about inheriting had to be sold to cover her part of the fine. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction as I remembered her gloating face the day Dad announced his will. But Emily's troubles didn't end there. James, true to his word, filed for divorce. He demanded the compensation outlined in their prenuptial agreement for her infidelity. What little money was left from the sale of the house went straight to him. In the span of a few short months, Mom and Emily had lost everything. Their comfortable lives, their social standing, their financial security, all of it gone. They were left with nothing but the consequences of their own actions. As for me, I found myself in a position I'd never dreamed possible. With the inheritance from Dad and the damages from Mom and Emily, I had more money than I knew what to do with. After much thought, I decided to buy a beautiful apartment in a quiet part of town. It was everything I'd ever wanted in a home: spacious, bright, and most importantly, mine. The rest of the money, I invested carefully. I spent hours researching, consulting with financial advisors, and making prudent decisions. My goal was to ensure a steady income for years to come, to build the security that I'd always longed for. As I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city skyline, I couldn't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, it had all led to this moment. I thought of Mom and Emily, now struggling to make ends meet. Part of me felt sorry for them, but a larger part knew that they were facing the consequences of their own choices. They had tried to take everything from me, and in the end, they'd lost it all themselves. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss, confirming my return to work next week. I smiled, looking forward to getting back to normal, or rather, my new normal.